When a widow pulled out a sealed envelope on stage, Dr. Phil did something he'd never done in 30 years of television. He stopped the cameras, broke protocol, and what happened next left the entire studio speechless. Sarah Martinez sat in the familiar burgundy chair, her hands trembling as she clutched a small white envelope. Across from her, Dr. Phil leaned forward, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something the audience had rarely seen: complete uncertainty. The studio lights felt hotter than usual. The cameras kept rolling, but something in the air had shifted. "Sarah," Dr. Phil said quietly, his voice stripped of his usual authority. "Before you open that, I need to know, are you ready for what's inside?" She nodded, tears already streaming down her face. The audience, usually so vocal, sat in absolute silence. Even the production crew had stopped moving. Everyone knew they were about to witness something profound. But to understand this moment, we need to go back 3 weeks earlier. Sarah Martinez had written to the Dr. Phil show like thousands of others do every year. Her letter wasn't dramatic or sensational. It was simple, heartbreaking, and honest. "My husband died 6 months ago. He left me something I haven't been able to open. I need help." The show's producers had seen countless stories of grief and loss, but something about Sarah's letter stood out. It wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't say. The envelope she mentioned had been sitting on her nightstand for 183 days, unopened, untouched, a mystery that haunted her every waking moment. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. When Sarah walked onto the Dr. Phil stage that Tuesday afternoon, she looked exactly like what she was, a woman carrying unbearable weight. She was 47 years old, but looked older. Her clothes were neat but worn. Her eyes held the kind of exhaustion that comes not from lack of sleep, but from too much thinking. Dr. Phil greeted her with his characteristic warmth, but even he could sense this would be different. As she settled into the chair, she placed a small white envelope on the armrest. It looked ordinary, standard size, slightly yellowed at the edges. But the way she touched it, the way her fingers lingered on its surface, told a different story. "Sarah, tell us about Michael," Dr. Phil began, using his classic technique of starting with connection before confronting the pain. Her face softened immediately. "Michael was the kind of man who fixed things. Not just broken appliances or cars. He fixed people's days. He'd see someone struggling with their groceries and he'd help. He'd noticed when I was tired and make dinner without being asked. He just saw people." The audience smiled. They'd heard love stories before, but something in Sarah's voice carried an ache that went beyond typical grief. "He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer on a Monday," she continued, her voice steady but hollow. "They gave him 4 to 6 months. He had 11 weeks. Dr. Phil nodded slowly. He'd counseled hundreds of people through loss, but each story demanded its own respect, its own pace. "Those 11 weeks, Sarah said, staring at a point somewhere past the cameras. "He planned everything. The funeral, the finances. He made videos for our daughter's future birthdays, her graduation, her wedding. He wrote letters to our friends. He organized our photos. He was so thorough." "That sounds like Michael," Dr. Phil said gently, "taking care of everyone, even at the end." "Yes." Sarah's hand moved to the envelope. "But this, he told me not to open until I was ready. Not until 6 months had passed. Not until I could breathe again." Her voice cracked. "Dr. Phil, it's been 6 months, and I still can't breathe." The studio had gone completely still. Even the usual shifting and coughing from the audience had stopped. Dr. Phil glanced at the envelope, then back at Sarah. "What do you think's inside?" he asked. A question that seemed simple, but carried enormous weight. Sarah laughed, but it was a sound without joy. "I've imagined everything. A letter telling me how to live without him, instructions for things around the house, maybe money he'd saved, or—" She paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's empty. And the real message is that I have to figure out life on my own. Dr. Phil sat back, processing. This was the moment where he usually offered insight, perspective, psychological framework, but something stopped him. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. "Stop the tape," he said suddenly, holding up his hand to the cameras. The red recording light stayed on for a moment, then flickered off. The audience stirred, confused. In 3 decades of television, this had happened maybe twice. Dr. Phil stood and walked to Sarah's chair. He knelt beside her, away from the microphones, and spoke softly enough that only she could hear. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. The studio crew exchanged glances. The producers in the control room watched their monitors, unsure what to do. When Dr. Phil stood back up, his expression had changed. "Turn the cameras back on," he instructed. "But I want everyone to understand something." He turned to address the audience directly, something he rarely did mid-show. "What we're about to witness isn't entertainment. This is a woman opening the last communication from the man she loved. This is sacred. If anyone feels they can't handle that with respect, you can leave now." Nobody moved. Dr. Phil returned to his chair. "Sarah, I can't tell you what's in that envelope, but I can tell you this. Michael spent his last days on Earth thinking about you. Whatever is inside, it came from love. You can open it now, or you can wait, but you don't have to be alone when you do." Sarah picked up the envelope with both hands. Her fingers traced the handwriting on the front. "For Sarah, when you're ready to laugh again." "When I'm ready to laugh again?" she repeated, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I'll ever open it." The seal broke easily, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Sarah reached inside and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. When she opened it, her face crumbled, and then, impossibly, she smiled. "What is it?" Dr. Phil asked. Sarah turned the paper around. On it was a hand-drawn cartoon, crude but unmistakable. A stick figure man with angel wings, standing on a cloud, holding a sign that read, "I'm still fixing things up here. The coffee machine in heaven was terrible. You're welcome." The audience gasped, then laughed, then cried. It was the kind of sound that only happens when grief and joy collide. Sarah pressed the paper to her chest, sobbing and laughing simultaneously. But there was more. But what happened next is something no one in the room or watching at home saw coming. Sarah reached into the envelope again and pulled out something small, a key. Attached to it was a tiny tag with an address. Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Sarah, what is that?" "I don't know," she whispered. "This isn't our house."
"I don't recognize this address." Dr. Phil looked at the key, then at his production team. "Do we have someone who can look this up?" he called off stage. One of the producers was already on it, typing the address into a computer. 30 seconds later, the producer appeared at the edge of the stage and whispered something to Dr. Phil. His face went through several expressions: surprise, confusion, and then something that looked almost like pride. "Sarah," he said carefully, "that address is a storage unit. Michael rented it 2 weeks before he died." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "What?" "We can go there right now if you want," Dr. Phil offered. "We'll take a break, drive over with a camera crew, and find out together. Or," he paused, "we can end the show here and you can go privately." Sarah looked at the audience, at Dr. Phil, at the key in her hand. "I want to go now, with you. I can't do this alone." Dr. Phil nodded. "Then let's go." What happened next became one of the most remarkable moments in daytime television history. The show didn't just cut to commercial. Dr. Phil, his crew, and Sarah drove 15 minutes to a storage facility on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Cameras rolled as they pulled up to Unit 247. Sarah's hands shook so badly that Dr. Phil had to help her unlock it. When the metal door rolled up, everyone froze. The unit was full, but not with furniture or boxes. It was full of life. Against the back wall was a workbench, Michael's tools neatly arranged. On the bench sat 3 projects in various stages of completion: a birdhouse made from reclaimed wood, a repaired vintage radio, and a half-finished rocking chair. But it was the note on the workbench that made Sarah collapse to her knees. "To whoever helps Sarah finish these," the note read in Michael's handwriting. "Thank you. She'll tell you I always fix things, but the truth is I always started projects I never finished. These 3 things were supposed to be done years ago. The birdhouse is for our daughter, the radio is for Sarah's dad, the rocking chair is for the grandkid we always hoped we'd have. Sarah, find someone who will help you finish what I started. Not because you can't do it alone, but because that's what life is, finishing each other's projects. I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry I couldn't stay to see you laugh again. But you will, I promise you will." Dr. Phil read the note aloud, his voice thick with emotion. The camera operator was crying. The sound technician had to step away. Sarah sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit, surrounded by her husband's unfinished dreams, and wept. But then she laughed. Deep, genuine, healing laughter. "He knew," she said, looking up at Dr. Phil. "He knew I'd spend 6 months being sad. He knew I'd need a reason to move forward, so he left me 3 projects I can't possibly do alone. He's making me ask for help. He's making me connect with people. Even now, he's still fixing things." Dr. Phil knelt beside her. Michael was a smart man. The smartest, Sarah agreed. They stayed in that storage unit for 20 minutes. Dr. Phil called a local woodworking club he'd worked with on previous shows. By the time they left, 3 volunteers had committed to helping Sarah complete Michael's projects. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. 6 months later, Dr. Phil brought Sarah back on the show. She brought the finished birdhouse, which now hung in her daughter's backyard. She brought the restored radio, which her father listened to every morning. And she brought the rocking chair, which she was saving for the grandchild she hoped would come someday. But more than that, she brought something intangible: hope. Real, hard-won, rebuilt from broken hope. "I'm not going to tell you I'm healed," Sarah told the audience during her return visit. "Grief doesn't work like that. But I'm forward. I'm moving forward. And Michael knew that's all I need. Not to be fixed, but to be moving." Dr. Phil smiled. The kind of smile that reaches the eyes. "Michael left you unfinished projects because life itself is an unfinished project, and you've honored him by continuing the work." Sarah nodded. "I have a question, though, Dr. Phil. How did you know to stop the cameras that day? How did you know that moment needed to be different?" Dr. Phil paused, considering his answer carefully. "In 30 years of doing this, I've learned that some moments are too sacred for performance. That envelope, that key, your husband's final act of love, that wasn't content for a show. That was a woman's life changing. My job isn't always to guide or advise. Sometimes it's just to witness, and to make sure you didn't have to witness it alone." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Not for Dr. Phil, not for the show, for Sarah, for Michael, for the reminder that love doesn't end when life does. As the show ended and the credits rolled, Dr. Phil did something unusual. He walked Sarah off stage himself, past the cameras and crew, into the quiet hallway behind the studio. They talked for another 10 minutes. What they said remained private, but when Sarah left, she was carrying the drawing of the stick figure angel, now framed and protected. In the weeks that followed, something extraordinary happened. The woodworking volunteers who helped Sarah finish Michael's projects became her friends. The birdhouse wasn't just built, it was installed with ceremony in her daughter's backyard, with neighbors gathering to watch the first birds discover it. Her father cried when she gave him the restored radio, saying it sounded exactly like the one his own father had owned. And the rocking chair sat in Sarah's living room, a promise of future joy. But the real transformation happened inside Sarah herself. She started volunteering at a grief support group, bringing Michael's cartoon with her. She'd show it to newly widowed people who couldn't imagine laughing again, and tell them, "My husband left me unfinished projects because he knew I need a reason to keep building." And they'd understand. Not immediately, but eventually. Dr. Phil kept in touch, not for show purposes, but because some connections transcend television. On what would have been Michael and Sarah's 25th anniversary, he sent her a card with just 5 words. "He's still fixing things, Sarah." She hung it above her workbench at home, next to Michael's tools, beside the unfinished projects that had become her finished purpose. And every time she looked at it, she laughed, just like Michael promised she would. Because sometimes the people we lose leave us exactly what we need to keep living. Not instructions for how to move on, but invitations to keep moving forward. Not solutions to grief, but reasons to build despite it.